Chronic Illness Therapist podcast. This is meant to be a place where people with chronic illnesses can come to feel heard, seen, and safe while listening to mental health therapists and other medical professionals talk about the realities of treating difficult conditions. This might be a new concept for you, one in which you never have to worry about someone inferring that it's all in your head. We dive deep into the human side of treating complex medical conditions and help you find professionals that leave you feeling hopeful for the future. I hope you love what you learn here, and please consider leaving a review or sharing this podcast with someone you love. Maureen Kane is a licensed mental health counselor in the state of Washington. Her clinical experience prior to private practice includes working with children and families at community mental health agencies. Before becoming a therapist, Maureen worked for 20 years managing social service programs supporting seniors, caregivers, people with disabilities, children, people with healthcare needs, homeless youth, and adults with learning literacy skills. She considers the therapeutic space to be sacred and works hard to create a safe and respectful container for clients to explore their inner world. Many of her clients come to her struggling with chronic pain, chronic illness, and medical trauma. She'll also be publishing a book in the upcoming year about her own journey with chronic illness called The Phoenix Requires Ashes. Maureen, welcome.
Hi, thank you.
So,
and does it matter that the book is out now? Or?
Oh, perfect. Yes, that's right. So your book is out and ready for publish. It is ready to be purchased.
Yes, it's on Amazon.
Perfect. Yeah, well, I'll definitely put that link that you sent me in the show notes so people can check that out. Do you want to start by telling us a little bit about your book and what led you to write it?
So I have experienced chronic pain and chronic illness much of my life, long before I became a therapist. And for me, what I learned was that changing my relationship to it is healing. So healing might be the symptoms go away, and healing might be that I grow. And I've had both experiences. And so whether or not we like it, pain can be a teacher and a guide, and also a real impetus for creativity. And so this book is poems from the last 3 years. So it started before the pandemic and kind of got me through the pandemic. If we're actually through, I don't know. So it's all kind of poetry about getting to know ourselves, finding our resilience, finding our way through hard things, and holding both the hard and the beautiful at the same time. So
I love that. That's really beautiful. Is there anything you can share about just the process of writing and kind of how that helped you get through, and what that looked like for you?
Well, for me, a lot of the writing just began with a question of like, how do I handle change? And I would just start writing and I would just see what would come out. And then when I would share poetry with other people, they would reflect back, oh, well, you've answered your question this way. Or you like, sometimes I don't even know what I've produced until I share it, And so, a lot of it is just, I don't understand something, I'm frustrated with something, and then something gorgeous comes out of it. So.
Yeah. And it sounds like this was a bit of a communal exercise for you as well.
Yeah. And I definitely had people read it and feedback to me. And I was like, oh, that is what I was saying. You're right. So
I think
that's a fun thing to do with clients too. So.
Oh, awesome.
I mean, not my work, theirs.
Yeah, for sure. Because I talk about this all the time, but we heal in relationship with others. We just can't heal alone. And so poetry, writing, sitting and writing, it sounds like such a solitary activity, but it sounds like you found a way to really make that community driven.
Yeah, definitely. And especially through the pandemic, of sharing a process with someone was really healing for me.
Yeah. That's awesome. Do your clients come in knowing that you're going to be either writing, or do you do art therapy as well?
I don't. So I have a large bag of trick isn't the right word. Basically, I want to meet a client with whatever works for them. So if it's CBT and it's intellectual and that's where they are, that's fine. I'm also an EMDR and lifespan integration therapist, which can be really helpful in dealing with trauma or medical trauma or changing our relationship to our bodies. And then people who are into it might bring dreams or art, and we might look at it together and see what's there that we're not seeing at first glance. So it really depends on what lights a person up and what works for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For the sake of the audience and maybe the people listening who aren't therapists, can you kind of help explain the difference between intellectualizing and what that looks like in therapy and how that might be okay for a little while, and then something like art therapy and how you maybe kind of what it looks like when a client comes to you and you're like, this is what we're working on intellectually, versus when you have a client come in and you're like, actually this is much more, let's do some experiential work.
Sure. So working cognitively or intellectually can be really helpful. I'm trying to make up an example. Like, let's say a person went to the doctor and they were told they would always struggle with the symptom. And so they took it on and they've always struggled. So we can say, well, and we can look at that intellectually and say, well, is that true? What would another doctor say? Do you want to check it out with someone else? And so we're working with thoughts and cognitions. And for some people, that's really helpful. And for other people, their pain is holding old traumas or something that's pre-verbal, so only the body can talk about it, that happened when they were really, really young. And so then we have to go into somatic experiences or art or something that kind of bypasses logic, because before the age of 3, we didn't have language. So we didn't lay down memories in ways that we can work on them cognitively, or something that happened under anesthesia. We wouldn't have a cognitive memory of. So
that's
I'm not sure. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
Yeah. And to further like piggyback off your answers, if somebody comes in and you kind of know that they would really benefit from more somatic work or experiential work, but they're just not ready, is that still a place where you might stay in that cognitive area with them for a little while, or how do you navigate that?
Yeah, I mean, we just go where the client needs to be. So if they need to stay in the cognitive area, that's fine, because for all I know, there's a whole bunch of stuff that if we open up, they're not ready for. So we're doing a lot of resourcing, connecting, cognitive work. And for some people, that's all they want. And that's okay. And then for other people, they're like, well, I've talked about this a lot and my relationship to it is not shifting. And some people come in because they know about different therapies and they're like, can I do EMDR? Can I bring you a dream? Can I, yeah. So we follow their process.
I think that makes perfect sense and kind of delineates for people wondering, how do I know what I need? And I think the way you said that is perfect. If someone comes in saying, I have talked about this, most of my clients who come to me or in my free consults, they're like, I don't really know if therapy is what I need because I've talked about this so many times and nothing changes. And so that's when I start to explain somatic experiencing and more experiential work. And that's how I know as well. But I had never thought about it in those terms. So I like how you explained that.
Yeah. One something I love, so I'm not trained in somatic experiencing, but one thing that I love about what you do is my husband got a TBI, 8 or 9 years ago. And it made it so he can't cry. And so we found him a somatic therapist because he couldn't express anymore. And so using other ways of entry into expression has been really important for him. So thank you for doing what you do.
That's beautiful. That really warms my soul. Yeah. And for those who don't know, TBI is a traumatic brain injury.
Yeah. Thank you.
My dad actually has one as well. And so it shows up in a million different ways. You just got me thinking now about somatic experiencing with TBIs. That's so beautiful though. Is there anything that you feel comfortable sharing with that about your husband's experience? And feel free to say no, that's his experience.
I don't know. The somatic work's been really helpful because it's very painful to watch him want to emote through tears and he can't. And he also wrote a book. It's called A Quest for Tears. So he wrote a book about his experience, and that was one of the ways that he healed through it and made meaning of it, because making meaning is one of the really important ways that we are in better relationship to our lives and our bodies. Yeah,
that makes perfect sense. Yeah, and our experiences, the meaning that we make of it can really kind of set us down a path of depression and anxiety, or it can or vice versa. I always want to be careful with making sure people know it's not about, necessarily just choosing, but that's why the work that you do, the work that I do, it helps people make that meaning. It's not just, well, I should choose to be happy, or I should choose to see the light.
Oh, yeah.
It's so much, yeah.
Yeah. And there is no way I'm going to pretend that pain isn't painful. And there is grief and there is anger and all kinds of stuff. So you and I are talking about at the moment about, like composting it and finding or goodness, I've lost the word, when you make gold out of the alchemy of it. But that doesn't take away, part of that alchemy is feeling all the really hard feelings.
Yes, that's such an important part of it, is feeling whatever comes up. I know acceptance is a topic that you work on with clients as well. And I'd wonder how you define it, or how you kind of navigate just the word acceptance and what that means to you.
Yeah, it's a tricky word, isn't it? It's like forgiveness. It's a super tricky word. So the trick with acceptance is that we're not necessarily accepting it and expecting it to never change. We're accepting that this is my reality right now. And if I'm in non-acceptance, then I suffer. I suffer less if I'm accepting it. That doesn't mean it won't change, and it doesn't mean it will change. So it's tricky, and we can't, sometimes when we accept things, they change, but you can't accept it expecting that it will change.
It's so tricky.
Yeah. But we do, like with pain, what someone once told me, we suffer 3 times more than we should. So let's say I have physical pain. There's the pain I'm experiencing now. There's the memory of all the times it happened before. So let's say my back goes out. I'm like, oh no, I missed work before. This other thing happened. I had to go to the doctor. And then there's all the pain that we're borrowing from the future. So, this is going to be the one that's worse than ever. This is going to be the one that disabled me, right? So if we can sit in acceptance in the moment and just be with what is, then we've lessened our load by 2/3, if that makes sense.
Perfect.
And that's not easy, but it can be touched at times.
What are some of your favorite tools on helping people like stay in that present moment, especially when it's really hard?
That's a great question. Some of it, are the meditative practices of breathing, or you're probably doing this in your work where you're sitting, you're kind of holding the experience and you're watching it shift and change, and you're noticing that it's not so solid. And then I think that diving into what does it teach me? Who am I becoming because of this, helps, because then it becomes a teacher and a friend more than an enemy. So, and we can try, I think we talked about trying a little bit together when you're ready, of one way you can do it. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. Do you want to go try that now?
Sure. So are you willing to play? Do you want to?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So this is just one way. There's lots of different ways, but this comes from Arnie Mendel's work. He's a process institute in the state of Oregon. And he believes that body symptoms are, like, he calls them waking dreams. So when we have dreams, something is trying to express through us or talk to us. And he feels that body symptoms are just dreams when we're awake. And so I'll just give you a little example. If you're willing to come up with a symptom, and it doesn't have to be like a big major thing, right? Just anything, the sniffle, anything you might be experiencing now that's just slightly annoying. So it could be the sniffles, it could be a little muscle twinge. You also could make it up if you don't want to do something personal.
Yeah, I'm constantly sniffly, so let's go with that.
Okay, great. Okay, so the idea of the sniffles, if you could name the direct experience of the sniffles, so we're calling them the sniffles, right? But really, what's the direct experience of it? Is it like pressure? Is it thick? Is it like, how would you name it if you weren't labeling it as the sniffles?
And are you asking for the physical, like sensory words that I would associate with it?
Yeah.
Okay, so the sensory experience of the sniffles would be, it's thick, but also quick.
Uh-huh.
It's the word clogged comes to mind.
Okay.
Cold.
Mm-hmm.
Constant.
Constant. Mm-hmm.
That's what comes up.
Okay. And then I think I'm going to borrow from your work here, but I know very little about sensory SE. But is there like a motion that goes with it? Is there something you can do with your hand or your body that speaks to that direct experience?
I think of clenching up.
Okay. So
Yeah.
I see your shoulders coming
Yeah.
up. I don't know if your hands are clenched. I can't see them.
Yeah. Kind of
So,
my
okay.
whole body just kind of coming inward, and almost like I can visualize a canal, right? And so I just envision the liquid kind of moving through, and I feel a bit, braced
Okay. So your brace of the canal is inside or outside?
inside.
Okay. Okay. So if you can kind of exaggerate that turning inward, the bracing, can you kind of make that movement bigger in your body?
Yeah.
And just notice what you notice if you exaggerate that. Scrunched up, bracing.
I notice shortness of breath.
Uh-huh.
And just an overall tightness in my body, shakiness.
Uh-huh. Okay. Okay. Okay, good noticing. Okay, so the words that you used were thick, quick, clogged, cold, constant. And so what Arnie would say is that our bodies are expressing something inwardly that needs to be expressed outwardly. So can you think with you can, I don't want to make you have your personal stuff on this podcast, but I will ask the question. Is there anywhere in your life where you need to be more thick but quick, or where you need to be more constant, or where you need to have that strong bracing of holding a canal that's not being expressed in your life right now?
Yeah, without sharing details, I just got a pretty vivid image in my head. Yeah, that brought up quite a bit of emotion.
Yeah, okay. I don't want to
Yeah.
make you cry on your own
No.
podcast, but
It's good to just kind of, I think it's good to let people in and see, like, this is what's supposed to happen, or well, whatever happens is supposed to be what happens.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so that's
Yeah.
what's happening for me. Yeah.
Yeah. So you got some kind of picture of where you could use these qualities in your outer life.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's one way we can have our symptoms guide us. And so we use it. Is it scary?
Sorry, the internet cut out for just a minute. So I got
Yeah.
the last thing I got was, that's one way we can use this to kind of have allow our symptoms to guide us.
Yeah. And then if we were in therapy, we might talk about what is this symptom in your outer life, or what is this situation in your outer life? How might you find that bracing that you need, or that thick quickness that you need? And so it might lead into a conversation about your outer life.
Yeah, absolutely. And for people who my experience, even as early as maybe like 5 years ago, before I really started doing a lot of this work, I had no ability to really get like images in my head. Like I couldn't really visualize much of anything. And so when people would talk about visualizing, or these kind of techniques, I would just feel so frozen and stuck because I couldn't do it. I couldn't.
Sure.
Do you have that happen with clients? And if so, what do you do to work through that with them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a lot of people get information through visual or auditory or kinesthetic sense. And so sometimes we might just be working with how does it feel? Oh, it feels really cold. Okay. Or are you hearing any messages? Is there a sound to it? And so we're trying to figure out sort of which sense comes to them.
Yeah.
And I haven't had anybody not be able to at least name the what the symptom feels like.
Right, right. Yeah, one thing that I think helps me as well, with maybe clients that are kind of where I was back then, is to help them name how quick or how slow or how
Mm.
heavy their thoughts are.
Mhm.
So if
Mhm.
we connect to our thoughts more easily than the senses in our body or external like if we connect more easily to just what I'm thinking, then can you just at least look at your thoughts as kind of images, like an image on a billboard? Can you
Mhm.
just see
Mhm.
a moving billboard, and how fast is that going? How big are the letters? So that's one way that we kind of
Mhm.
tap into that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And the one we went through is just kind of one way in, but
Mhm.
it sort of is an example of, the symptoms are there and we hope they'll lessen. And we certainly want to check it out with the doctor. We certainly don't want to suffer if we don't need to, but they're there. So what can we do with it other than just suffer?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. I think sometimes we almost feel like we need to be in our suffering. And I think, in my experience, you can let me know what your thoughts are on
Mhm.
this, but I find that that happens when we've just never had anyone around us who can accept us when we're suffering. It
Yeah,
almost
absolutely.
exacerbates the issue.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so. Yeah.
Yeah, it's if we're not it's kind of ironic, because I think for those of us with chronic pain, you might learn, sometimes we're in this phase of our illness where that's like all we think about and all we want to talk about, and it's kind
Mhm.
of, we're highly identified with it. And for some people, they experience like no one wants to hear it. They feel like,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
and so it's funny because, well, not funny, it's interesting how um the more we try to get what we need, sometimes the less the people around us are willing to give in that way. But there are ways to navigate this identity and kind of the relationship between our chronic pain and our needs and the
Mhm.
people around us and what they can and are willing to give us. And yeah, do you have any thoughts about that? Or
Yeah, it's a tough one because until people experience it, they can't, they can sympathize, but it's hard to empathize. And the people experiencing it want so badly to be understood. And they're often misunderstood because they've been to a bunch of doctors. They're told it's not a thing, all the stuff that they have to go through. Um, so it's tricky. And I think part of this work that I think you do and that I do is um, helping a person turn towards their symptoms and provide the nurturing that they might not be getting from other people, because it's kind of a marathon. And so people are great with acute stuff. If you have the flu, people will bring you soup and give you sympathy. But if you've got a thing that has lasted for 10 years, it can be a little more challenging. And so it doesn't mean we shouldn't reach out, because we absolutely should. And we can also add to our toolkit ways to turn towards ourselves.
yeah,
Um,
and provide some of that
yeah. And I'm
nurture.
thinking about, like, I didn't get much sleep last night because I'm doing the menopause thing. And so I don't sleep a lot anymore, actually.
Oh man.
Yeah. So, but what I've learned is that I at least can take those moments, because I'm hot and then I'm cold and then I'm hot, and I can take those moments to be so exquisitely gentle with myself and say, "Oh, okay, you're cold. Let's snuggle up. Let's have a blanket," and just talk to myself really lovingly. And if I do that, I get a lot more rest than if I'm like, "Oh my God, here it is again."
Yeah,
And so I'm trying to use it as an opportunity because my body's telling me it needs some attention. And if I can do that, my nights are better and I don't suffer as much the next day.
that's such a
Um,
beautiful example. Thanks for being willing to share that.
yeah, and lots of people can understand it, so I can get support sometimes. And then if I tell someone who's 20 about it, they're like, "That must suck," you know.
Yes, I just had my first baby, and so I
Mm,
understand
yeah.
the lack of ability to understand. Even though I had sympathy, like you said, there's the difference. And I think I had empathy as well, but there is such a difference when you go through something you
It's
actually go
yeah,
through
kind of the
yourself.
embodied empathy
Yeah.
of you've done it too. And your experience, of course, is different than other people's, but you can touch part of other people's that I couldn't because I didn't have kids. And so
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
That makes perfect sense.
yeah. And congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. I love your example of just, if I'm cold, I get a blanket, rather than when I'm, because we've all been there too, where it's like, God, this is happening again. And like, why? And we just go down this hole. And sometimes it's okay if that happens, but
Sure.
then we want to kind of pause and ask ourselves, what do we need? What do I need in this moment? And
Yeah.
that feels
And
like
I can even be mad about it and nurture myself at the same time. Like, it's all okay. I just suffer less if I can kind of wrap my arms around it and go, yeah, this sucks.
Right.
Okay, what do I need?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I love that. That's such a good example. Another thing that was on the list that I have of your topics is about friends who say the wrong thing or go silent.
Mm-hmm.
Can you speak to that?
Yeah. Well, I think we were just speaking to it a little bit ago around, especially when something's chronic, that friends get, I don't know what friends get. They get tired. They get, you can get the sense that like everybody's living their life and nobody's paying attention anymore.
Yeah.
Or, friends that you've had that were like your party friends. They're the ones you went hiking with and then you went out to a beer and now you can't do those things. There's a lot of loss there. And some friends will be able to tolerate that and some won't. And so, coming to therapy and just having that conversation can be helpful, because it's easy to start to think, I already think I'm broken because my body's doing this thing. And now this is being reinforced by the friends that I have. So sometimes it's understanding which friends you go to for what, because there will be ones that can stick with you. Sometimes it's understanding that I have the power to nurture myself when other people aren't around. Sometimes it's going to a support group for people who really get it. And they're able to respond in a different way of like, hey, my thing's acting up. I can't be here for you now, but I will be next week, kind of thing. So it's kind of a broad conversation, but it is something that comes up when there's a change. And it's not just with illness. I mean, you may have noticed like having a baby, right? Your friends without babies, that relationship's going to change some. And so there's this whole navigation of where's my level ground now?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Esther Perel talks a lot about just how she talks about it in terms of romantic relationships, but I think this is true of all our relationships. One person can't be everything.
Mm-hmm.
And that concept is really hard, I think, in the beginning to kind of wrap your head around, but you're speaking so beautifully to it. Like one friend might be your party friend, and one friend might be really great for calling, crying in the middle of the night when I'm having a pain flare up, whereas maybe that friend wouldn't be the friend that I call when I get a flat tire, and I have someone else that I might call for that.
Right.
So it's really recognizing who is good at what in your life, and doing that with ourselves too, like so that we don't overextend ourselves too. If I'm not particularly great at a problem, I can say, I don't know about this one, and I can kind of, that then the person can figure out how to get that need met without it being my responsibility, but we're still able to be in each other's lives and
right. Or you can problem solve with that person if I don't know, but I'll hang out with you while we try to figure out who might.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it just goes back to meaning making, like you said earlier. The meaning that we put to, if somebody can't help us, do we then internalize that as like, that's because I'm too much or I'm broken? Or is it just like, this person just doesn't have the tools to help this particular problem?
Yeah. I had that experience years ago with a friend. I was crying and she said, I don't know what to say to you. And it just killed me, because I was like, oh, I'm too much. Nobody can handle this. And years later, I'm like, she didn't know what to say. Like, I made a whole thing out of it, but she was just telling me that her experience, and it didn't mean she wasn't my friend. It didn't mean she didn't care. She just wasn't experienced in what I was going through.
Yeah. It's really easy to internalize these messages, and I guess maybe in a way sometimes it's easier to blame ourselves, because then almost it feels like we have control over it.
Right. Yeah.
So
yeah.
Because that's where acceptance comes into, if
Acceptance of others.
acceptance of others and acceptance of, I think the inner critic pops up as a way to make sense of what's happening. If your friend can't help you, you feel really upset about it, and then the only thing that you have to make up a story, your body just, and so the story for some people is I'm too much. For other people it might be the world is incompetent, no one can. We make up stories to help us navigate that inner feeling of maybe hopelessness or frustration or whatever feeling that we just don't want to feel.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Is there anything like maybe a piece of advice or something that you really love to leave clients with, or that you find yourself kind of a piece of advice that you find yourself helping others kind of figure out over and over again?
I think I do a lot of helping people recognize two things. One is that they have a place in the world, because sometimes it feels like the world's going by and they're not. And the other is recognizing their resilience, because people will say, oh, I had to go to the dentist and I was just exhausted all day. And I'm like, you went to the dentist, even though, you were panicky and you were nervous, and you told the dentist exactly what you needed. You got what you needed, you did it, because we tend to like filter out our strength and focus on, whatever symptoms that we're having. So I love to be that mirror of like showing people that they are so strong. And I know somebody said to me once, I was like, oh, I'm in so much pain, I must have a low pain tolerance. And they said, I bet you have a really high pain tolerance because you have so much pain and you're living a life. And I'm like, whoa, what? So helping kind of reframe strength and resilience, and also the sense that our bodies like to heal, like they kind of like to get better. So, they might struggle, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the next thing that's going to happen is the one that's going to topple me. Because our bodies are pretty strong. Like sometimes they hurt and sometimes they do weird stuff, but they're awfully strong. And helping kind of reframe that as well.
Yeah, those are beautiful messages to leave people with. And I hope people get a lot out of that. So thank you for sharing.
Oh yeah, you bet.
Awesome. I would love if you are willing to share one of your poems from your book. And as a reminder, people can find your book on Amazon, and it's and remind me the title of it.
Oh, it's called The Phoenix Requires Ashes.
Great, by Maureen, Kane. And your husband, what was his book again?
Oh, his is A Quest for Tears.
Great.
And his name is Sean Dwyer, DWYER.
That sounds beautiful.
Yeah. So
when you're ready, yeah.
Okay, so this one I just wrote about if your body could speak, right? So it's called Her Body Speaks. I speak for the sinew that pulls at my bones, red and raw, gaping and gnawing, holding all together. The strength required astounds, willing to knit again if pulled too far. Listen to my cracking, straining, reshaping. I do it for you, and you don't notice until I snap. I speak for quiet awareness where my fibers align, juices flow, and symbiosis drives us forward. I speak for the miracle that knits muscle to bone and lets us dance. Can you not see me as beautiful? I speak for the curves and dimples that pad and feed the body, badges earned from creating and sustaining life, holding nourishment for lean times. I speak for the fat that keeps you warm, cushions your falls, and knows exactly when to hold and when to release sustenance. Can't you see me as nourishing you? I speak for the wisdom of physicality, the pulsing, beating, moving aliveness that creates a body, your oldest companion. May we make peace so you can see my miracles.
That was so beautiful. As I was listening, I was just kind of allowing myself to hear, not think, and I just kept getting the feeling of nurture, just nurturing over and over and over again, which is exactly what we just talked about. Putting that warm blanket on when you're cold, and appreciating your body for taking care of you even when it's hurting.
Yeah, I'm glad you felt that.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Is there anything else you want to share or say or leave the audience with?
Not that I can think of.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Good.
thank you for the opportunity. I hope it's helpful to folks. And thank
Yeah.
you for all the work you're doing.
Thank you as well. All
Yeah,
right.
you bet.
Thanks, Maureen. If you learned something new today, consider writing it down in your phone notes or journal and make that new neural pathway light up. Better yet, I'd love to hear from you. Send me a DM on Instagram, email me, or leave a voice memo for us to play on the next show. The way you summarize your takeaways can be the perfect little soundbite that someone else might need in order to better absorb the same lesson. Lastly, leaving a review really helps others find this podcast, so please do so if you found this episode helpful.